our market. So here, I want us to label, what is this axis? Price. What is this axis? Q. How does my demand curve slope?
Negative.
It slopes downward, right? Okay, so demand. You have to be a demander, you have to be what? What are the three conditions? Willing, able, and within a time period, right? Okay, demanders are willing and able and within a time period to buy something, right? Okay, the law of demand states, when the price of an item goes up, what happens to the quantity demand? It goes down. When the price of an item goes down, what happens to the quantity demand? Okay. There's three reasons for the law of demand. Okay, one is the income effect. That as the price goes up for something, it impacts your income, right? And you're probably gonna buy less, okay? The second reason, no clue what that was, is the substitution effect. That if a price of something you like goes up, can y'all substitute with something else? The last thing is this idea of diminishing marginal utility. That the first time we buy something, it may give us a lot of satisfaction. But the second time, what happens to satisfaction? Does it stay the same? It goes down. And we talked about a couple of items like this, like going to CC's, right? That first place tastes good, the second place probably not. Popcorn. I don't know what your diminishing marginal utility item was. Gum, we have that in here, right? It loses favor, so your satisfaction goes down. Okay, so when there is a change in price, we have a change in your quantity demand. What changes our demand? There are 5 reasons.
Substitution.
Well, let's look at the acronym. Taste or preference. A price is a change in quantity demand. Okay. The next one is expectations. Income. Market size. And the last one is what we call our related goods. Y'all remember 2 types of related goods? Peanut butter and jelly, which is a what? Complement. And then the other one is a what? Substitute. So someone give me a substitute. Okay, so off brands. Okay, so complement, I'm just gonna say PB&J, and then brand name and store brand. So Miss Radine, I used to always buy Splenda for my husband, but then I realized the HEB brand one was like half the price, and now we use that, and he has no clue that it's different. He hasn't even seen the little, they both are yellow little packets, and he has no clue that I'm saving $3. Okay, how do y'all feel about this side? Let's look at the other side. How does our supply curve go? It slopes upward to the right. So it's price, quantity. So to be a supplier, it is a producer, right? Over here, demand was the consumer. Over here, it is the producer, and they have to be, what are the 3 conditions to be a producer? You have to be willing to produce it, able, and to do it with at various prices, right? Alright, and we know at various prices, what prices is our producer not willing to sell at?
The cost of making it.
The cost of the item, right? Why would he not be willing to offer it at that various price? He's not making profit. Are they willing to offer it at higher prices? So the law of supply states when the price is low, the quantity supply is what? Low. When the price is high, what is up with the quantity supply is high? And that, this one is a positive, right? It is a direct relationship. Over here, is this a positive and direct? This is an inverse. And there's one reason for the law of supply, it's profit. Many of y'all probably are gonna go into businesses and you don't wanna offer something at a low price, right? Because that means you're not being paid. And so I talked about last time with those, I talked about Taco Bell and DoorDash in this class, right? And how, do any of those DoorDash people want to be able to pick up a DoorDash at Taco Bell where there's no tip? No, so they're driven by profit because that $3 that is paid by DoorDash really doesn't benefit them. No, that goes into gas. So if there's a change in price, I will have a change in quantity supply. There are seven other things that cause our supply curve to shift. And I'm gonna remember the acronym GETS tips. So G, E, T, S, T, I, P, and S. The first one is government regulation. And then expectations of the producer. Then technology. And then number of sellers. Taxes, inputs. Do y'all remember what inputs are?
What you need, like raw material.
The FOP, yeah, your raw materials. And then we get productivity. And then subsidies. Do y'all remember what subsidies are? It's the government giving money out, right? Okay, so the reason why we have this is because once we start market interaction, I have everything in front of me now. And I'd be like, okay, if it's demand, what's the reason, right? If it's supply, what's the reason so I could go to? So now what we're gonna look at is bringing both our supply curve and our demand curve together. And when those interact, that is where we get a market clearing price. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to like the flea market or like, what is it, Trade Days and Canton? And y'all go there and yes, they have a marked price, right? But can you usually negotiate that price? And so that's the market, the demander and the supplier coming together. And we're gonna be looking at that today in our PowerPoint, which have I given you this PowerPoint? No? Okay, I'm gonna give you this PowerPoint. I'm gonna come around and talk about, and I know it's titled to shift or not to shift, like all of our assignments have been. But we're gonna look at market. In the marketplace, y'all are typically the consumer, or are y'all typically the producer? The consumer. None of y'all produce anything in this lifetime right now that you could be a seller. Anybody? No? No one's producing anything, right? And so for y'all, we are always going to be able to relate us to the consumer perspective, the demand side.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so what we're going to look at is this interaction and what causes the shifts and what will happen to our price. Because there is a lot of things that we know today that is price always moving around on us. Yes, and y'all probably realize that with gasoline, right? Hence why this picture's there, that gasoline is costing us a lot, right? And if anything goes on in the world, which I can't talk about current events, if anything does happen, which y'all seen in past history, right? Wars, what usually happens with the price of gasoline? It goes up. And so, what we're gonna see, huh?
Nothing.
What we're gonna see, what does it take to have a market? We have to have buyers, which you are. We also have to have sellers, which none of us are selling anything, right? And what we see is that when we interact our supply and our demand curve, we're now going to be able to label some new points. One is equilibrium, where they intersect, and then we'll have equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So here is my graph. Okay, do y'all see my E? E is equilibrium, and that is said in economics that it has cleared the market. That both the supplier and the demander have mutually agreed that they will sell at that price. And so where my equilibrium price is, my E is, and my equilibrium quantity is, that is where it's cleared the market. Basically, the quantity demand and the quantity of supply are the same. And so we're going to start looking at what impact does scenarios have on price. And we're going to be looking at toothpaste. So Crest has a very successful ad campaign. Does that change demand or does that change supply?
Demand.
Demand, okay? And so if they have a very successful ad campaign, which way is my demand curve going to move? They're advertising, it's going to move to the right, and I want us to look at what happens to that price now. The price went up. What happened to that quantity? And so a lot of suppliers, they really do these ad campaigns because they know if it takes off, what could they do with their price if everybody's demanding it? Can y'all think of anything that has been successfully advertised as of late? Nothing? Poppets, yes. Yes, I have no clue. I can't watch what is it, Nickelodeon or whatever my kids watch, or the Disney Channel, because they have every single new toy that's out there. And are those kids walking away from those commercials saying, Mom, I need to have this next? And what happens to the demand for that toy? It goes up. So I'm glad that we have streaming services now that they don't watch regular TV with commercials, because that would increase our demand and our household for toys. So price increase, quantity increases. Now we're going to look at the price of seaweed. And many of y'all are like, what the heck does seaweed have to do with toothpaste? Seaweed is an ingredient that goes into toothpaste. Sorry, yes. I don't know what it does. Every year we look it up, I forget, but it helps it has a scientific name, but it helps break up the plaque in your teeth. You know, you have that little buildup of that gritty stuff. That's what seaweed does. So sorry, in case you were against seaweed and you don't like it in your sushi. Sorry, it was also in your toothpaste. Kyle, you're just not gonna go brushing your teeth anymore. Okay, so our supply will decrease. So let's look at this when supply decreases. Price goes up and our quantity goes down. Do y'all remember when OPEC shut the US out and they placed an embargo on oil? Didn't we see price of gasoline go up and then the quantity of it go down? And that's what established that people were having to pay those higher prices. Isn't this exactly what happened with toilet paper? The supply had went down, but the demand was still there. Okay, so we'll look at that next time. The next thing, there is a new machine that could harvest seaweed faster. So is that supply or is that demand?
Supply.
Okay, and so we see that, which way is my supply curve gonna go? This new machine can harvest it, put it to the right. And so let's look at what happens with technology. When we introduce technology into the business, what will occur is that prices will go down and the quantity will go up. Do y'all remember Ford? Last year we talked about him. Yes, he did make the moving assembly line, right? That increased the supply, which we always said Ford made the car affordable, because now, did the price go down? Did the quantity go up that the average American can now afford? And so technology, time and time again, will have the most positive aspect in the supply of being able to increase it, but also lowering prices. Okay? Our next one. A new sealant in toothpaste reduces the frequencies of brushing. Alright, so now I tell this to my daughter, I was like, now you don't have to brush in the morning and at night, you could just brush in the morning, right? So what is this going to affect, demand or supply?
Demand.
Demand. So now, which way does my demand curve move?
Left.
To the left, because do we need to demand as much toothpaste? You know, some of you are like, I'm still gonna have the same amount of toothpaste I'm brushing in the morning and at night, right? Well, think about most kids. Do you think they're gonna brush? No. Okay, most adults are already in the habit, right? That they're like, if someone just told me that it reduces my frequency, you're still gonna brush, right? Okay, so it's just habit creates a creature. Okay, so if the price of toothpaste increases, what happens to the supply of toothpaste? Supply,
Oh, it's the same, right?
price.
If the price goes up, then doesn't.
What is price? Is it supply?
Demand. No,
It's quantity, right? So there's nothing that happens because when there's a change in price, it's change in quantity supply. So if the price increases, let's look at it. Price goes up. Is the supplier willing to supply more according to the law of supply?
Yes.
Does the demander want to buy any? No. So this creates a surplus. And I'm going to talk about surpluses with y'all maybe on Friday, but most definitely on Tuesday when we come back. Because usually when price goes up, we don't want to buy it, right? And so, but then that signals, what will happen is that this will eventually signal to the producer, what does he need to do to his price? Lower it, right? Okay. What happens when they lower their price too much? It's going to be below equilibrium, right? Does the demander want that? If it's really low, the price.
No.
Does the supplier want it? So what does that create? This was a surplus, this is a now shortage, which we'll get to talking about Tuesday. When there's a change in price, it will create this stuff. And so, how do y'all feel? What we're gonna do now is I'm gonna walk you through a couple of examples and then y'all are gonna try it on your own. I would keep this page out that has all our info so that as we start graphing, I have this in front of me. Can't get that PowerPoint to move. I have this in front of me so I can be able to determine.
Thank you.
Okay. And what we will be doing here in supply and the market with demand, we will eventually be carrying this over into our next unit when we look at aggregate. So again, even up here, all my info is there. What we're gonna look at is our first two examples. Sorry, guys. Our first two examples. We have to look at this. Schools across the nation prohibit students from wearing jeans to school. Okay, is that supply or is that demand? This is a change in demand. What's the reason? Expectations. Schools are now, students going to schools now expect, right, that they can't wear jeans. So that means they should wear, I don't know, khakis, okay? So let's look, y'all said this is gonna affect demand. So what happens to my demand in the market for jeans? It decreases, but before I could even graph that out, I need to come and do equilibrium price, one, and I need to come down here and do equilibrium quantity, one. Now, let's look at what happens to my demand curve. Y'all said the demanders, are they gonna be demanding jeans or not?
No.
They're not, okay, so then my demand curve goes which way?
To the left.
To the left, so let's see what happens. Oh, that's too light. I was trying to get a different color. So then, what happened to my price now?
just
Go
down.
down.
It decreased, so I'm gonna circle decreased, and then what happened to my quantity? It decreased too. And so in AP, if we're ever having a graph, all of this stuff is your analysis to show what's going on. Okay, this next one, the price of cotton increases. Again, we're in the market for jeans. What is this gonna affect? Is it gonna affect supply or demand? Supply. What's the reason?
Input.
Input price increase, right? So now let's come over here, put my equilibrium price. So if the price of cotton increases, which way is my supply curve gonna go? To the left? So then, what happened to the equilibrium price? It increased. What happened to the equilibrium quantity?
Decrease.
Alright, do you get what you're doing now? Alright, so I'm gonna let you work on this, and then we'll come back and go over the backside.
I'm talking about jeans.
I think so, and it'll tell you on the left-hand column, jeans, air travel.
Okay, so the last two are
Yeah.
just the only ones.
Uh-huh.